残酷な天使のように少年よ神話になれ。
What is up, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today we're going to be discussing, for the first time of many times to come, Evangelion, Neon Genesis Evangelion. If you're tuning into this and you've come across the show and seen that there's a show called the Evangelion podcast, welcome. I first watched Evangelion in 2003 in a musty house in Townsville with my friends Josie, Shelley, and my sister Valentina. It was the first time I ever, really connected, I think, in a huge way, in a sort of deep way, with an anime. I mean, before that there was Pokemon, before that there was Dragon Ball back in Italy, where I lived for a couple of years. And with the imagery in Evangelion, with lots of the sort of Christian, crucifixes and stuff like that, it kind of tapped into my experience living in Italy for that brief amount of time, with the sort of religiosity of it all. My dad is German, and so there's a lot of, Asuka is German, and there's a presence of that language and that terminology, nerve and sila, So that's in my blood, and while in Townsville, as muggy as it was, as I remember, I'm remembering it quite fondly right now as I kind of cast my mind back. I was learning Japanese very intensely. I actually got up to, I would probably say, a pre-beginner stage where I could kind of get by. I love the language. I love especially the traditional culture of Japan. And my hope is to go back. I went briefly for literally 5 days in 2016 for the first time. As in entered the country. When you're a kid, you're on flights and stuff, and in maybe 1999 I stopped by Japan in the airport, and I just remember those amazing koala shaped cookies that they have, like the chocolate filled cookies. I just want to say, folks, if you have lived in a city, Shinji, what he goes through, obviously, with that intense stuff, it's almost like Evangelion is a show of two realities. There's the, Judeo-Christian, philosophically charged, esoteric, occultastic, chambers of Guf, Angel, Sakiel, Liliel, all these beautiful names in this terminology, this very, and not just imagery, it really dives into some real valid questions about selfhood and psychology and existentialism, beautiful, but also it is this in a self-aware way, just a story of a kid who's moved into a new city and started a new job and living in an apartment, so I love that sort of dualistic aspect of Evangelion. I suppose maybe humans are wired this way, but I can't help but attach some of my, if I'm thinking about back then, 2003 when I first encountered it. Obviously Townsville's not like a big city, but in 2008 when I revisited it, after my army accident and stuff, when I had gotten super additionally existential, I was living in the city, living in Sydney in particular, and Sydney and Tokyo, I believe, are sister cities. And I developed it's very inexplicable. I call it an Amelie-ism, but basically I have such fond memories of kind of convalescing after my army accident in Sydney, with the presence of Evangelion there in some way. I think we had the DVDs there. And I would love for people to write in. You're more than welcome to. You can either write into just the Evangelion podcast at gmail.com, or just go directly to my main site, which is albertkesser.com/contact. I'd love to hear what your mood is and all of the associated vibes and settings and, even music or food that's for you associated with Neon Genesis Evangelion. For me, for example, in 2003, as Josie and Shelley, if they're listening to this, might attest, every time we went to Josie's house to watch some more Neon Genesis, it was all about the McCain pizza. So 4 minutes in the microwave. You don't want to go crispy or anything. You want that to be, oh man, juicy. You know what I mean? Juicy. So yeah, that's what you want. Juicy and drippy and almost mushy. Neon Genesis it provides relief to itself within its own show. There's a beautiful sense of self-awareness to the whole thing. It knows when it has gotten intense. It knows when it's time to just hang out with Pen and just hang out in the apartment. Honestly, folks, think of long-lasting relationships and stuff. It goes the same with media and entertainment and art. Is you stick around when the thing has basically got all your bases covered. So Evangelion is this universal thing, and I don't see it in a fanboyish way. I think to come at things from a fanboyish angle is actually undervalues them, and it piles on their worth, dependent on the person's subjectivity. And for me, that's the furthest thing from with Evangelion. It is objectively extremely well made, extremely well written, well realized, incredibly uniquely, conceptualized and executed, and yeah, simply beautiful. For me, my heart will always belong to the original 26. I love End of Evangelion unto itself, as a optional addendum. My headcanon, some people like to kind of leave it in that sort of space of, who knows what, but for me, Third Impact was prevented, and the original intention of the ending of well, let me see. I don't know. Should I give spoiler warnings, I guess, for some people out there? Needless to say, I think if you're listening to this, you have either watched the whole series or are considering doing so. If you haven't, what's great is you wouldn't know what on earth I'm talking about, so there's no real spoilers in any case. But yeah, I dare say you wouldn't be listening to an Evangelion podcast if you were, then again, I don't want to assume. Maybe you're completely fresh. In either case, I will always presage spoilers, but so for my, again, spoiler warning, etc. My belief is that the integrity of that original 26 episodes is what stands and is the most primary, unaffected canon, which is, it ended after 26. When killing Kaoru, that's it, Third Impact prevented to me, and the rest of what happened in his mind of why did you kill him, why, that's just him processing this, unfortunate thing he had to do, but also extremely fortunate because he saved the world. And there's him struggling to reconcile what he's done for the betterment of mankind, and the sacrifice that must be made, because there is a death that needs to happen when you commit yourself to the world, and it is the death of solitude, it's the death of depression, the death of isolationism, and the death of getting lost in subjectivity. And this leads me into why I value Neon Genesis Evangelion not just as a series of, in that entertainment and art sphere, but as a beautiful basis and very valid, and almost, if I were to say, it would edge out right 51-49 for me. It's 51 for me about the dialogues that this can open. And I say this, I said it in a comment recently. Someone was making a joke post about, I'm going to face my depression, and then there's a picture of Shinji being this shit is hard. And I just commented, look, don't, I know this is a joke post, but just want to put this out there to anyone, is depression is a fog, a grey fog, and I speak from experience, that desperately wants you to believe that it is a concrete wall, that if you reached out, it would just be this impossible thing. But in fact, as with the fog, when you reach out, your hand goes the way through, and then your forearm, and then your shoulder, and then you step through it and onto the other side. And that fog never disappears. Like we get fog. It's like a weather condition. It is, and that's internal as well. Like depression rolls along like fog, and to live permanently in depression is as illusory and as false and as impossible as living in fog forever. So please never let that notion of depression, of you being depressed, like we are not fog. We witness fog, we move through fog, but it's as ridiculous as saying like, oh, I'm fog, I am fog. It's like, no, you are going through fog. Okay, fog isn't you, you're fine. And another great thing is, fog is this thing that is an atmospheric condition, takes place usually when it's cold, and guess what? Your blood pumping through you right now gives you an inherent warmth that you don't even have to work for, that you don't have to do anything. It's just this inherent warmth and light to you. So yeah, that's important to note. And people might be like, wow, your show going on about this is like, it bears saying, and it bears coming back to and reiterating throughout life. So I wanted to touch on that too. My connection to Evangelion is also wrapped up in Kojima as well. So and also in Legendary's Monsterverse as well, with via Jordan Vogt Roberts. All of these are kind of form one giant vibe family. I recorded 70 episodes of Kojima-themed podcasts of this chronicle, which, if you're wondering, I record basically what comes truest to me to speak about, and then that goes on just one giant eclectic feed with everything on it, which is just the Albert Kessler podcast, and then anything that has a core theme to it, a consistent subject matter, which in this case will be Evangelion for this one, that goes on to a separate feed for your convenience, So this one will just be anchor.fm Evangelion, and you'll be able to find it everywhere as the Evangelion podcast. But I guess we can talk about the Vibe family a bit later on, I guess. But yeah, Death Stranding, I covered it. There's some similar notions of the fabric and this of reality being changed, and realms and creatures that would normally have remained in their own dimensions and distances away from Earth are brought to us, which it shares DNA with Evangelion there. Reluctant protagonist definitely shares and that's with Joseph Campbell's refusal of the call. That's a classic kind of mythological attribute for these stories. But it's honestly, folks, like if you're listening to this and first of all, if you haven't seen Evangelion, I'll mention this. So another member of the Evangelion vibe family is Kubrick, and I would actually compare and hold them as peers and equals to each other. Evangelion and 2001: A Space Odyssey. I see them as equal to each other for what each are able to achieve with what they had, and some interesting prescience stuff. They say that Death Stranding had this interesting kind of prescience to it about COVID. The fear, the fear of Tokyo 3, of angel attacks, and the idea of being literally the city's shrinking into the earth. There's no wonder I was drawn, I think, back to kind of watching it and re-immersing into it, especially during the end of last year. It felt truly apocalyptic. Like I felt that at any time bombs could drop. Like it felt really tense. It felt very, end of Evangelion-y. But thankfully, we are not singing our last pre-LCL, elegy. We've managed to survive so far, but yeah, I figured I'd also mention what the podcast is going to be going forward with when I do the Evangelion themed podcast, I will stitch together and create the Evangelion podcast. I love analysis and I love speculation and discussion, and they just sort of, it's a byproduct of my engagement and relationship with these properties that I value so much, and that is just something that sort of pours out of me. And what I also love doing is having some material in front of me, commenting on it, using that for tangents, and just kind of going from there, and then basically just creating, if you've seen Twin Peaks, it's just creating this audio log, which then if people resonate with it and connect with it, that makes me happy, and if that adds to your life, then it makes me even happier. So that's lovely as an incidental thing. Another member, and now that I'm just on a roll really, so other members of the Evangelion Vibe family are Mega64, who are very kindred to me. I value each and every one of them. From the crew, you got your Kevin and Johnny, making on the ones and zeros, as they say. And you got the main guys, you got Garrett and Sean and Derek and Rocco, who just did this amazing, incredible, coming directly from the passion of these artists, and they're satirists of course, but they're artists as well. And the Evangelion in 5 minutes is just, please go watch it. Oh my lord, for a good laugh as well. And then watch that documentary. It's just brings a smile to your face, and please do. I highly recommend it. And the idea is down the line to chime in with them and see if they each of the primarily Evangelion leading members of the troupe, which are Rocco and Garrett, to have them both or individually, or either of them on the show via Zoom to just riff things out about the rebuilds. My status with the rebuilds, I am, believe it or not, this is how I'm stepping out. Don't worry, that's going to be part of what this show will be. I'm actually about 20 minutes into the first rebuild film, haven't seen the rest, and I know, don't worry guys, I know they're like, wait, what? You haven't even got a podcast and you haven't seen it. It's no, hey, it's the OG. I start, my heart is always in, and by the way, that those 26 are endlessly rewatchable. If that's all we ever got, I'd be making the podcast all the same. It just so happens that in a beautiful way, I hold Evangelion to be the example of artistry being untouched by commercialism, and yet the two coexisting so beautifully. The integrity, the artistic and philosophical and creative, and yet all kinds of, the artistic integrity of Evangelion is not impacted for me by the fact that you can get Lance of Longinus tweezers or whatever. It doesn't matter. They exist symbiotically with each other, separately, very separate, but symbiotically. And I love that. It's very inspiring. And I think Mega64 takes some of their cues merchandising wise from that. I certainly do with mine. I create patterns that I put on my work based on my own interpretation of the real world phenomena of morphogenesis. It is essentially the manner through which nature creates all of her patterns, and it's this electromagnetic phenomenon that makes it so that capillaries and as in the human body, arc and course and create themselves along the same electrical predestined path as lightning through the sky, or the way that branches and twigs spread from branches. So that's all that one common electricity, and my patterns are an exploration of that kind of infinite field, which and this leads me to the second aspect of what I do creatively, is the quantum myth, is this fictional universe I'm developing, and within that, at the very origin of that universe, and this is again in line with our own world, is there is a time before time, existence before existence, etc., and there is a field, and this field is the ever-shaping, and all forms of whatever would follow in terms of human history, that's the first thing that comes to mind, obviously, because I'm human, but cosmogony, anything in the universe is completely predestined by this extant, infinitely varying and existing in all dimensions of time space, already predetermined. But because it's invisible, we think that it's invention, we think that things are happening for the first time, but it's all predestined, and that ties into my love for Evangelion's themes of cyclical repetition. And so that's what my patterns are, is they are sure, they look like I'm just sort of making them, but my belief is that even the words I'm saying, even the next actions you take are all, to some degree, from some perspective, predestined by the fact that like you're able to kind of glide your hand from your body in one kind of steady movement and arc. It's like that those atoms that your arm just filled as it traversed through this in space, like those were already there in some dimension. So, and that's where the ever shaping kind of takes place. And so, as you can see, I'm very in my own sphere creatively, so wrapped up in origins, like cosmic and religious feeling. I wouldn't say entirely religious, but religious feeling aspects of entertainment and art. Like in the quantum myth, there's the one being, Olvisutar, who is feminine and masculine, and we see a lot of feminine and masculine themes in Evangelion. All of the children, the pilots, and it is a lot about how Shinji discovers his masculinity and navigates and incorporates the powerful feminine forces around him, and lets them kind of, and that deference to the feminine, which I have great throughout history, throughout politics certainly, and in nature, like deference to the feminine and the recognition of the feminine as void, as that which we emerge from, as in womb, and that which we return to, which is tomb. If not to get crass, but it's just symbologically true. If all of existence is just ones and zeros, as it is in the digital realm, ones are penises, as in like the male, and the circle shape is the feminine. And in fact, like sperms, like little swimmers, they look like ones, and then the egg looks like a zero, and so it takes both for the whole universe to tango. But there's no questioning that behind the backdrop is feminine. And so when, again, spoilers for End of Evangelion, but when Rey is ascending, it's crazy, my fiance's name is Rey, R-A-Y instead of R-E-Y, but I'll have to bring her into the show. She hasn't seen it yet. I'd love for her to watch it. Very, very worthwhile concepts that I'm sure she'd resonate with. But yeah, that idea of, hey, it's just she's just waiting, just like nature. We say Mother Nature, so she's waiting to reclaim things. And Shinji in some of the early episodes mentions, the cicadas allowed it because nature has reclaimed them. And there's a whole branch of I think there's a phobia even tied into it, but it's the fear of the envelopment into the feminine, like fear of vaginas or whatever. I think HR Giga tapped into this too. It's like we came from that, we don't want to go back to it, kind of thing. And it's like you have to recognize that's what will eventually happen. We will dissipate and return to like omniform, like 360 will just scatter. Our atoms will just rejoin with eternity and stuff, and so that's why I actually initially was pretty against End of Evangelion, because I don't like the idea of a creator being pressured or threatened, but I'd have been able to tell. It's almost like you can just tell, like a bullshit detector, did this come from him feeling pressured, like as it is? And there may have been a prompt there for him to do it, but the thing as it is not. It's like the fucking complete opposite of wanting to give them, that sort of I don't know if he cast his detractors in a certain way, but let's just say maybe a good measure of his detractors were the people who just wanted more. I want more ever fights, and I want blah blah blah, all this like sort of stereotypical resolution. And End of Evangelion is a gigantic fuck you to any kind of stereotypical, conventional, archetypical resolution. It is the end of all things in a beautiful, poetic, frightening, terrifying, solace-bringing way. And some people, like it's loose, that you can interpret it as, some people say it's the third impact but happening on the outside, whereas for Shinji it's happening on the inside. For me, it's just a pleasant addendum, which is quasi-canon to me. For me, again, it's just, I'm happy to know that the original series ended with Shinji doing it. He pulled it off. It just happened to end in a very existential, in a monologue kind of way. But if there was no uproar, they wouldn't have made any more, and it just would have been, that's it. He did it, question mark, but then I think there's a huge amount of evidence to say that he did pull it off with, once he prevented, and that's a beautiful, think of that in movies, the idea of in, like, Mission Impossible is like, you pull it off with 1 second left on the timer, like, it's consistent with that, with an optimistic ending. It's just extremely, impression, like, avant-garde and, abstract at the end, but for me, I read it, I know it's up to interpretation, and I know that Surikara and Anno sama, and I say that, like, fully fucking respectfully, and I'm not a fucking, by the way, I do not fucking watch other anime, and I stopped studying Japanese, like 10 years ago, so I just can't not say these people's names with, like, the fucking due respect that they have, like, that they've earned. And they continue to earn, like Ueda. I do Fumito Ueda episodes based on his works, and those are collected as the Ueda podcast. I also do the same for Kojima. I tend to decide whether or not it's like, why not call it Anno podcast? But for me, it's you have to look across the filmography, really. And with Del Toro, for example, I actually have two. I have the Del Toro, then the Pacific Rim, and the Monsterverse. I just found that all these outlets are available, and I was able to, create little hubs for each thing. But with Evangelion, speaking of hubs, speaking of the amounts of things that we can dive into, it's really going to be a thrill over time to pull up an article on so and so aspect of Judaism or so and so aspect of Christianity, or the making of the episodes themselves, or there's just so much, and there's such a devoted and academically inclined and scholarly fan base and community that I will have won't ever have any shortage of aspects and angles to dive into. So, but to keep this one just under the 30 minutes, because I just wanted it to be this introductory kind of riff on what the show's going to be. For me, it's like, to give you my whatever Evangelion profile is, like, NG all the way, original 26. For me, it's not too interpretable that he pulled it off, and that's that. And the Evangelion is this fucking astonishingly beautiful, violent, just from that first scene, it's just like the anime equivalent of a fuck you, But so to loop back, what I was saying is, so Anno, like, it's just that he would, like, Eva is like the main thing that he's made, like, that I resonate with. So then that's why, and like with I had Neil Gaiman going for a while, but then I was like, well, I think the main thing really that I resonate with him, and this is case by case, sometimes you'll go with like Hidetaka Miyazaki, for example. I resonate with so much of what he does, so I have that show just on its own for Bloodborne, Elden Ring and stuff. And those are all going to have separate sub-shows, again, because I really care about that courtesy to the listeners. Is that if they only want to listen to one particular topic, they're more than welcome to just go to that one feed, and I can just provide that courtesy, because I actually don't mind the admin. In fact, I think I was born strange because I love admin. So, wherever I need to repost things for people to have just the things they're interested in, more than happy to do that. So, but so I'm really, really, really looking forward to. Obviously, I'll finish my rebuild watch, and then comes and that'll probably be form a few of the upcoming episodes, is just to kind of give you my thoughts on each of the rebuilds, leading up to when film 4 comes out, Thrice Upon a Time. And obviously I'll be speculating along the way of what awaits Evangelion, and I personally think PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X, PC as a next-gen third person, I would love open world. We'll see how we go, though. Something with scenes and dialogue and sensibilities that evoke God of War, but on an Evangelion scale, would be beautiful. That really is, and then also you are gonna hear me talking about the very real and beautiful possibility of a Denis Villeneuve directed Evangelion live action, because it does belong in that realm. Shin Godzilla proved that there's this mood and this sense that cinematic, real, like, live action sensibility to Anno, and I would love my dream. I'm going to stand up actually to say it is to see Anno on set with Villeneuve one day. So. But that's 30 minutes, folks. So have a lovely rest of your evening, day, any time of day. And God's in his heaven, all's right with the world. And until next time, bye for now.